back, third time's a charm. Today we are debunking some common misconceptions in sales. We're taking a fun topic. We're not just going to look into a sales process. We're gonna debunk some myths that Hollywood has fed us. So to just jump in and get started, our first myth is sales is convincing someone to buy rather than solving a problem. Does anyone have anything they want to jump in right away with off of that?
I could just expand upon it. There's this. How many of you have ever had somebody say, "Oh, you're in sales," in almost this like demeaning way, like as if it's like a negative, sleazy, disreputable type of career, and it's this outdated viewpoint, right? Teaching in a college. I mean, again, when I went to college, we didn't even have a sales class in our business school, so it kind of devalued it. Right? It suggests everybody can do it, right? That it's not really a skill, and so there's a lot of these outdated things that society has kind of created around the profession of professional selling that will be fun to debunk tonight. I actually kind of forgot what your question was, Abby. I just started talking.
I was so excited.
Bring me back onto that path here.
I love that. The conversation, it was about, have you guys ever heard of this? I know you guys have. I'm working on my pitch. Like, I gotta go on my pitch. And what I hate about all of that is, like, if you're pitching at people, you're not listening to what they have to say. So it's not really about pitching. It's about presenting a solution that solves a problem and giving people the opportunity to buy from you. Yeah. Stop working so hard at the selling and start working at presenting a solution that maybe solves a problem. 100%. I can see Grant's like, yeah, what do you got, Grant? I know you're thinking something.
Oh, I'm just thinking about, all the even current opportunities I'm working in the sales that I'm trying to close. It really feels like if you're trying to convince somebody to buy something, that's a point where you need to like step back and really reevaluate, like, am I approaching this the right way? And the answer is like, obviously no, because I think if you really understand your client, you understand where they're at, the challenges they face, you understand, of course, what type of, what your product or solution is going to be able to do for them, then it's not really like, there's the convincing aspect of like, hey, of course you're going to build rapport and you're going to, you have the soft skills side of selling, of course, like that's kind of a whole nother conversation to have. But like when it really comes down to it, it's like, hey, how can I put my product, my service in a position that it doesn't matter if it's me or if it's some other guy or gal or whoever it is, like that's the reason they're going to do it. And it's not solely because, hey, I'm just good at convincing you to do something.
When I think the majority of us love to buy things, but we don't like to be sold, right? We like the opportunity to buy something, but we don't like somebody selling at us.
Right. Well, it's about your focus. Are you making the sale for you, the salesperson, or are you making it to help the other person? Right. The second you're customer focused and put their priorities first, it doesn't come across as salesy, right? It comes across as helping. But the second you make it your priority because you're chasing a commission or chasing a quota, then you're in the convincing game, and nobody wants to.
I have to tell you, I have to see what you guys think of this. Like I literally got this sales email this week. It was end of quarter quota. Anna, I've emailed you several times and you haven't responded to me. Are you going to be willing to have a conversation with me? Or are you going to make me go have a conversation with my manager about how I'm not going to hit my quota this quarter? Why do I care about your quota? Oh my God, you guys. I was like, this is the worst sales email I've ever seen in my entire life.
Well, you're talking about it, so it's okay. Like
I shared it as a what not to do. Nothing in this whole process was about me. It was all about you and your problem.
No, yeah, it was trying to be that honest, but it was the wrong honesty, right? Like it was trying to be like I'm going to try to be so honest and upfront about something, but it doesn't hit right when you have no trust with that person. You don't know that person, right? Like it just, that's where it doesn't work, and that's where you're trying to convince, and it just yeah, just you just feel, it feels bad when you say it. But if words matter, right? And for me, it was the same thing when I was early in my career. Guess what got me into sales? The Wolf of Wall Street kind of stuff, right? Like, sell me this pen. And then you say stuff like, I'm a sales assassin. I'm gonna hunt my prospects, right? And everybody does it. Look out there. There's people saying it. Like, what prospects love that? Yeah, I'm hunting you, man. Where are you? Whoa, I'm a predator. You know, you're looking after a predator or something. Like, that's what I did and said. And I said, come on, wolves, we're gonna be assassins. We're gonna hunt these people down. That was so wrong, because where do you think then you're selling on your front, where you're just like, come on, you got to go with this, let's go, where you want to sell on your back foot, where you're just like, hey, I'm just getting information, I'm just being curious. If you go with us, great. If you don't, I'm unattached to the outcome. And it's words matter. But look at, and I think that's a big myth out there, and that's the hustle, right? Like, rise and grind, and we're going to do this and hustle. And that doesn't work for me anymore. I get it though, because sometimes in the younger, you get that works because you get kind of excited about it. It's kind of like more athletics and sales and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't produce when you're convincing. So yeah, it's a bad outlook at that way. And I think someone trained someone, Anna, to send that email.
Well, they thought it was funny. It did get my attention. The crazy thing is, he left a voicemail too, and his voicemail was, I should play it actually. It was very like, he sounded so defeated, and he's like, I've called you several times and you're not answering. So here's the backstory. He actually works with somebody that I know. So he had a really good in. He had a good way to get in. So he had like the right start in there. I've been on the road for the last 3 weeks. I'm so busy. I can't even, like, this isn't a problem I need to solve right now. So he had a good in. He could have followed up, but he left the voicemail sounded like he hated his life. So I was like, gosh, I don't even know if I want to call this guy back. And I understand where it was coming from, right? I've tried this lady. She's not calling me back. I'm going to send her a funny email. She's not responding. Like, so he's trying really hard, and he's frustrated because he's not getting that response from me. But the thing that we all need to remember, it's not about us. Like, I wasn't not calling him back because I don't like him or whatever. I'm just busy. So keep trying, but keep a positive attitude, keep leading with the right things, keep your integrity. But it wasn't on him. And I think it's hard not to take it personally, right? And we do. And then that comes through the frustration, comes through the quirkiness, the forgetting what you're really there for. We kind of lose sight of what we're in the conversation for. So it was such a glaring example of where we can kind of get off track.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say that the biggest blessing in my career early on has been selling a product that no one except one person needs. Selling fire trucks, like, fire departments need it. And fire departments don't have a lot of money. It's not like they're the Rockefellers and can just, oh, she's called me 5 times, I'll just buy a truck to get her to stop calling me. They don't do that. So I really have to, like, refocus and think, okay, focus on discovery. Can we build them a truck that they need? Can we meet their needs? All of those things. And I don't know if this is advice that's good advice, because not everyone can sell fire trucks, nor do I want them to, because then I have more competition. But maybe in the start of your career, focus on a niche industry. Don't focus on something that, everyone needs.
I think you bring up too, like the differences in transactional selling and relationship selling.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like, you have to have enough pipeline and momentum and opportunities to continue to, have success for an extended period of time. But, like, Anna, I think that email to me just screams like, oh, this is just a transaction. Like, let's just do something so we can be done. And it's like, there's nothing, again, about you, the buyer, nothing about, how this benefits you. This is just the transaction that I need to make to help me. And, that could probably be another topic, transactional selling, relationship selling. But
I have a question. So we talk about Wolf of Wall Street. Is there a time when transactional selling is the right thing? Like, when that, like, hyper funny, whatever, like, if you're selling, and I think there probably is. There are times where you're, like, buying a commodity and the relationship's not as important.
Well, I think there's times transactional selling. I mean, when you walk into Home Depot and ask for help, where something is, I mean, that's a transactional sale. I'm not going to build a relationship with the person that helps me in that type of setting. Maybe at Menards, because I go there like every day, but not at home. But so I mean, there's a place for transactional sales. I'm still not sure it's the sales bro mentality of Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
um, but there's absolutely a place for transactional selling. I mean, it's not what any of us do, but it's a huge portion of the economy.
So I hate like so many things that Wolf of Wall Street did, but some of the things that they had fun. Like so there are having fun in sales is possible and you can have fun. So if there's any takeaway, like there were times where they were actually having fun. They were competing and having a good time and um, that can be fun. That can be something really that we can dig deeper into too.
Yeah.
If your reason for doing something and you have a conviction that it's the right thing to do and you're excited about it and you're cheering, like that's fun. When I feel when there's chatter at my location, right? Like when things are buzzing around the office, like people are on the phone, deals are getting done. It's just a fun atmosphere, right? And it's just like, woo, right? Music's playing. There's this like, and like, ooh, sold deal, bells are ringing. I'm like, we need more cowbell here, right? Like it's just that's a thing of Wolf of Wall Street, but no one's sitting there like, hey, we just completely screwed that customer and made a bunch of money on this, right? Like that's where that mentality will totally derail you, because I've seen that before too, right? Where they're bragging about how much they made on the sale or what they did, and that's where you're wrong, and that will be short lived for you. And that's where the problem comes in. And that's why I've seen those cultures and I've been part of it. I'll be like early, like that was more of I wasn't completely bro mentality, but that was a mistake I had, was like, hey, this is what sales guys do, right? This is how we do things. And I realized like real early that, wow, I like actually sleeping at night and hitting the pillow and not worrying about what I did, right? And having integrity and having honesty. It wasn't me. I was matching something that wasn't me. It wasn't authentic. So then it doesn't work long term. And I think that happens a lot of times when you're early in a career or even later, you read something, you see something, and then you just start becoming that thing. And my wife always calls me out on things too. She's like, you must have read a book about something. And I had to slow down once in a while, like sometimes, because I take something and I'm like, I'm all in, right? Like, it's like, okay, I'm going to sell like this now. I'm going to change this. And it's like, no, just be authentic. There's some rules, and we go through them here. And if you can just follow those 3 rules and be your authentic self and do it your way, you can win. And that's where I think we can stumble sometimes.
And we're all like bobbing heads right now because you like totally hit it. But honestly, it's crazy about what you just said is that's what kind of made me fall in love with Eric and like how you approach sales leadership and what you're teaching your students. And like, there's not enough of that out there. There's a lot of like, this is the trick to get people to buy from you, and your approach and everything. But plug your book here. I loved. Have you read? I'm sure we've all read Eric's book. You should talk about your book a minute, Eric, because that is
I
really.
never talk about my book.
You should. You should. It's so good.
The book that I accidentally wrote during COVID, basically, because I got bored and started writing and then decided it would look like a book. But yeah, I'm not sure there's much to say, but I appreciate
there is too. It's the opposite. But the book is all about like how it's the opposite of like tricking people. It's about what our superpowers are really, our authentic, everything Neil just said, our authenticity, our honesty, our being sincere with people, giving people the opportunity to buy instead of pushing things on them.
It's about understanding human to human relationships. I mean, I think, going back to a comment I made, about how people will jump to a conclusion that describe sales in very negative terms, right? And another example of that would be saying that it's, hey, there's no education required in sales. Anybody can do it. Because they've seen a lot of accidental sales, people in their life who moved into sales because, out of college, but that isn't what they studied. So there's this assumption that is not a skill. But the reality is, relationship-based selling is about building human-to-human relationships. It's about understanding other people, connecting with them, building trust. Like, that's really complex stuff. I mean, it's in line with, going to school to study psychology, and skills like that, just being able to build those connections and utilize those to help somebody solve a problem. So I mean,
I love that. Okay, so this is probably my favorite type subject for a podcast that we could ever have. So I'm going off the rails, you guys. But so would you say a myth is that you need to know everything about your product? Because that's one of the things I hear all the time. People are like, I just don't know enough. So I'm like really nervous to bring this up in conversation. Like, you gotta, I'm not ready yet to have this conversation. Now, what I just heard Eric say is it's like knowing about the process is the piece there. So let's talk about that piece, because I think that's probably one of the most common things that I hear is like, I'm not ready to have the conversation because I don't know enough.
yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I don't think product knowledge is nearly as important as people think it is. I'm not going to say it's not helpful.
Right.
Because people want to talk to somebody who they believe is an expert and can answer questions. But if you don't have the product knowledge, you can surpass that with great customer focus, great customer service, getting people the answer even if you don't know it. I mean, because people see that, right? Nobody expects everybody to be an expert at something. So it's you can be wildly successful without product knowledge. Matter of fact, one of the best salespeople that ever worked for me, selling software, could barely type an email. He was almost, I mean, if he had to add two columns together in Excel, and I hope he doesn't listen to this, but if he had to add two columns together in Excel, like his head would blow up trying to figure it out. But he was phenomenal at sales because he could walk into a room and build a relationship with anybody. And I think, that we all have our strengths, and if we play into those, I think we can be successful.
I kind of want to jump in on this just because I sell a very complex product that I do not know. I've been at Midwest Fair for about 6 months now, and I couldn't even tell you half the stuff about a fire. I mean, I know my basics, and that's what I learned is if you know the basics and the basic components and how they all work together and all that kind of stuff, you can that's what you need to know. When someone asks me a super complex question about a pump or, why would I get this pump versus this pump when I have these specific fires, I get on the phone and I call our engineers and I say, hey, I have a customer that has a question about this specific pump. Can you talk to them? What I've found my successes so far in my short time there is my personality and my wanting and willingness to get to know my customers, to get to know what their department's going through, what they really need, why they're looking for a truck, are they applying for a grant? Like all of those things are what get them wanting to work with me. It's not that I can tell them the whole fact sheet of this pump.
And I think honestly, like that's what people care about mainly. Like, yes, they want to understand the specifics of the product. They want to know the little ins and outs. But really what they care about is that you understand them, what they have going on. How can you purchase? Is it because you're leveraging a grant program or whatever it is? So I think, even in the almost 9 years that I've been in tech, the complexity of this solution that I sell is very, very high. Plus, every year, over year, it just continues to evolve, build, grow. So there's never a point when you're going to know everything, right? So I always like to also talk about I love having the humility to tell a customer, hey, that's a great question, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I'll go find out. I think that builds a lot of credibility, that builds rapport. And then the other point I was going to say, and kind of building off Abby's point, go sell as a team. Hey, bring somebody with you, bring an expert. If you're not the expert, that's all right. Bring a friend. Makes it more fun.
I think what you just said that is really, really important. It builds credibility when you say, I don't know the answer. If you don't go get the answer, you lose all the credibility you just built. So there's a follow through. It's okay to say you don't know the answer, but you're responsible for getting it. That's part of your job, but it does build credibility, to be honest.
So, right at the beginning, Anna, you made a comment about people thinking that, sales is a lot about making a pitch, right? Just to dive back into that topic for a second, to me, sales is much more obviously about, asking questions and listening. and understanding than it is about pitching. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are on like the importance of that.
I think it's infinite. It's funny because where you think you would pitch even at when you're at doing a presentation to a room full of people at a conference, for example. That's a place where you think you pitch. I don't even pitch there. I find out who's in my audience because first of all, I don't even know what conversation to have if I don't know what buying types are in my audience. So I want to figure out who's in my audience. So I'm having the right conversation. So I try to figure out who's in my audience. I try to see if I have any advocates in my audience. Do I have any customers in my audience that might want to talk? Guess what else? People love to hear from other people that are doing what they're doing more than they do us. So if you can get an advocate to pull in, and honestly, part of the problem too is I just, oh God, I get so nervous presenting. Like I've gotten a lot better than I used to be, but it used to be just shakes and anxiety. And it's so much easier if you can get other people engaged with you and you can make it a conversation instead of feeling like you need to stop in front of everybody and just pitch. I don't know how you teach, Eric, the way that you do. I wouldn't get very far because I'd be trying to get the students involved in the whole conversation. It'd be awful mess if I was trying to teach, but I feel like it makes it so much easier if you can like get that interactive conversation. And I would be a horrible public speaker that had to give keynotes. What do you guys think?
It's what we talked about last week a lot, right? So you see it in episode 2. It's all about the quality of our questions we're asking, and that's what happens a lot of times. Is like you can't always like I got to be a problem solver. You got to be problem finders, right? And that's sometimes they're not going to just come outwardly and say, "Yeah, I'm having these big issues. Can you help this for me?" Like I wish that'd be great, but it's just the quality of the questions we ask, and sometimes you've talked to enough people and you have enough advocates and you're like, I just talked to Jim who has a similar business and he's got this going on. Are you guys having the same problem? And then all of a sudden you can see like, Rick didn't think about that. Right. And so now you've just planted some pain and that's great. You just gave him something to think about that he's never thought about before. Now you're turned into, wow, this person actually kind of knows what they're talking about. You've entered some trust at that point. Right. And can you find that problem? Not so much just like, hey, what problems you're having? What's keeping you up at night? They're not going to volunteer that. But can you ask better questions to get to that? And yeah, you'd be a great public speaker because you get the audience involved. Right. And that's the problem with most public speaking is like you said, if you're not resonating, if it's not hitting that person, they're gone. they're somewhere else at that point.
Well, and you guys all sell products that, I mean, if you break it down feature by feature by feature, are wildly complex, right? Hundreds or thousands of features if you really were to, segment those out. But, the average, buying decision is probably based off of seeing a single digit number of those features because the value they're after is probably, defined by just a couple of things. Everything else comes along for the ride. But when we make it all about thinking that it's about a pitch, then we just want to show way too much. And then we overcomplicate the conversation because now we've shown them a bunch of stuff they didn't really actually need to see in order to say yes. But now they need to understand it because we put it on, we put it on the table. Where if we really focus first on understanding what the actual decision is going to be made based off of, and then show them that, we simplify the process and make it a lot more successful.
I love that.
I see that a lot with, and I've done this before myself, is, when you go to pitch your product or solution, if you don't really understand, Eric, like what you said, like what's important to them, what's going to move the needle, you make it really complex and you start to muddy the waters of all of a sudden you're talking about all these features, functionalities that maybe really don't make a difference. So like my pitches have always been very, business value focused. How can we create ROI on some type of purchase you're going to make? Right. And then, once you can hit those things, the rest kind of takes care of itself.
One thing that I'm curious about, I was actually having a network conversation when with someone and they were asking about what I do, and I was telling them about fire truck sales, and everyone is always immediately curious because who sells fire trucks? And one question they posed me, I kind of had to sit back and think about, and I'm curious your guys' take, was she goes, "Oh, so what's your sales process? Like what process, like what sales methodology do you follow?" And I guess I've always, I mean, I'm pretty early in my career, but I feel like you kind of make your own methodology. I think good sales reps do. You can't just be like, oh, I follow spin selling and that works every single time and that's what I do. I'm just curious what your guys' kind of thoughts are on sales methodology and following one.
I think the biggest thing is you nailed it, Abby. Find yours. It's kind of like anything you do in life. Like you have some people that are on the one side, like let's talk about diet, carnivore, omnivore. You know what I mean? Like everybody's like so like, no, you have to do this, you have to do this. It's like, what if I took a little from this and a little from this? What if and because the biggest thing that you want to get is adherence, right? You want to be able to use it consistently over time and be authentic with it. So I always like if I read a book, if I see something, I'm going to take a couple nuggets and like, ooh, I'm going to pepper that in here because that makes a lot of sense. And that fits my personality and that works with what I try to do. And that's where you kind of make your own recipe, right? And so, but there's three main things in that recipe, because if you don't have flour, you don't have sugar, you don't have the main things, then your cookies are going to suck. Your sales are going to suck, right? Like, but then when you start getting a little better, then you want to put a little dash of pepper in there. You want to put some other things in there, and then you can start getting a little bit more robust with it. But I would say you need to adhere to it. So if all of a sudden I come to the guys and say, hey, we're going to sell this way, this is how we're going to do it, and my guys looking at me, and that happened. We had a trainer come in, and it was kind of more, when we got in there, it was a little trickery to talk to the decision maker, right? And my guys, I could tell a couple of them were just not feeling it. I'm like, you don't like that, do you? And they're like, no. I'm like, don't do it. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, we're going to go in and try to get to the decision maker, but I want you to think of your way of doing it and come back to me and tell me how you're going to do it. And now someone came back and they wrote something way better, and now we're all using that, right? So it's like, you got to find what you adhere to, and that's your own. And so it's your recipe.
You lost me at putting pepper in your cookies. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I didn't have the right analogy. I didn't have the metaphor. I was just ad-libbing. I'll be better. I'll get better.
The rest of it was great, but I'm not sure I'm on board with the pepper in the cookies piece.
Yeah, I get it.
You know, I totally agree with what Neil said. You know, I'll say it just a little bit differently. I mean, I think every sales methodology is like a tool in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you're going to have the tool that, you know, or tools in your toolbox that you're more comfortable using, and that's probably going to be your default. But you're also going to have tools that are for different situations that you can pull out. And so, yeah, I mean, I think over time you kind of figure out your own methodology by understanding, you know, what, you know, whether it be solution selling or challenger sales, or, you know, there's lots of them. I'll also throw this out. Salespeople spend way too much time thinking about their sales process and not enough time thinking about the customer's buying process. And I think if we spent a lot more time understanding the buying process, we'd be way better at selling.
I 100%. I'm sitting here thinking about, like, do you guys ever feel like sales is just a series of pivot? People, one of the hardest things for me as a leader, people are like, well, how do you sell it? I'm like, well, it depends. Like, what did they say here? What was the conversation? What's the background? Do you know somebody around that area? Do you have, I mean, like, the answer is really, it depends. It depends on the situation. And I struggled with trying to figure out even how to coach salespeople in that, because there were so many it depends conversations. And we've been doing a lot of different practice calls and practice presentations, and what works purely to your point, Neil, what works for Abby might not work for Grant. And so, like, and if you tried to make Abby act like Grant or Grant act like Abby, that would be probably a big failure. They each have their own style, and people can tell when you're not following through with what feels right for you. So I think the sales methodology depends on the situation, depends on the personality, depends on what works for you and who you're talking to, and maybe even the evolution to the piece that you're at in your career. Like, what you're doing today, Abby, might be different than what you're doing in a few years. It's really crazy how you evolve and what you're comfortable, even the conversations you're comfortable having.
Okay, one question that I'm so curious to ask, and I want Neil to go first because I think he's gonna have a great answer. Many people think that salesmen have
That's
to
a
be...
lot of pressure. I mean, that's a lot of pressure.
You're gonna be so good. It's gonna be fine. Many people think that salespeople have to be extroverts. Grant or Neil, I feel like you're a little bit of an extrovert. How do you feel that helps your sales? And if it doesn't, how do you feel that introverts, how does that help them?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And it's kind of like, do you have to be a naturally born salesperson to be good at sales? Right. And same thing, you got to be extroverted to be great at sales. And they've proven that's not true. And so whenever, and that I hear that from my team sometimes, and that's why I have this BS flag. So I carry this with me every day, just so you guys know. So if I have to call it on people, I throw it. But most importantly, I throw it on myself. It's just a daily thing that I know that it's here, and I have to call myself and call BS on myself. And yes, I'm extroverted. But when it was cool to be introverted, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm actually introverted, but I just struggle to be extroverted. And I'm like, no, that's BS. I'm very extroverted, right? Like, and that's my strong suit, right? Like, but I know I need to know when to calm that down, because there's plenty of times when I go into a meeting and they're like, "Ooh, I don't like this guy," right? Too much, and right, so you have to calm it down, and it's who you're speaking to, and there's people that want to know more about the product, and that's why, like to you guys' point before, that's why I got my sales engineer there, that I can be like, hey, you're going to talk to this guy now, and you could just tell they're vibing with each other, right? And then it's just different situations. But there is no natural born salesperson. I think you have tendencies that make you want to get into sales and that push you towards that, but it doesn't have to be extrovert, introvert. It can be anybody if you work at it and if you want to be great at it. But the thing I get all the time too is, and just to follow it, is like everybody just says, hey, follow your passion or go find your passion. I also think that's BS. It's like finding happiness. Where is that? Happiness, passion, where are you're not going to find it anywhere, right? But people are looking. They think it's behind the new house that happiness is coming. They think passion is like, I just don't have the right job. I don't have the right. Believe it or not, I'm not passionate about copiers and printers and office technology. I don't like I'm not passionate about that, right? But I found a passion in this industry, but it took time. And when you first start at something, you're going to suck at it, right? And it's hard to be passionate about something you suck at. Just be honest. But over time, you get better and better with it. But yeah, so I went tangent. But yes, I am very extroverted, and that's helped me in sales. But I've also had to learn from my introverted friends. I had to steal from them and morph into them in certain situations.
Yeah, I'll go back to that, introvert versus extrovert, because I hear it all the time from students, right? A student will sign up for their, a first sales class on campus, and they walk in and they, if they are an extrovert, they naturally assume they're going to be good at sales. And if they're an introvert, they're taking it and they kind of, quietly are like, well, I'm not sure I'll be great at sales because I'm an introvert. They all walk in thinking that is a determining factor on success. And it's a horrible belief that I spend a lot of time fighting back against. But the easiest point to kind of push back on that is, again, I think we would all agree that, asking questions and listening to our customer are two of the most foundational things we can do to build a relationship and understand how to sell to them and how to sell, how to solve a problem. Well, listening comes natural to an introvert. Like, they're naturally better at it. Instead of, thinking about what I want to say next, they're actually listening to the words that the customer is saying, and they're picking up on it way better. Where the extrovert might pick up on it, but they're actually probably already thinking about their response because they can't wait to get their words in. And I think, there's that is a complete myth that extroverts are born to sell and that introverts aren't. Salespeople can be in either one of those two buckets or somewhere in between, and be either successful or fail, or be a failure at sales. It has nothing to do with that, in my opinion.
I'm having a flashback to a job interview that I had with somebody, and I was asking them about what brought them into sales, and they said, well, I've been told my entire life that I should go into sales because I like to talk a lot. And I was like, oh, red flag. Red flag. I mean, it's good if you're not afraid to have conversations with people too, but that honestly is not necessarily the best skill set walking in, liking to talk a lot. Because do you like to listen?
That's such a good point, Anna, because I think that's the biggest, like, I remember being young and people saying, you should be in sales, right? Like, that was the thing, because you're extroverted and you like to talk. And that's a complete myth now that we're busting. right? Like, it's like, no, you got to learn to listen. And that has been, as Eric's point, that's been the hardest thing that I have to change in my repertoire.
All right, guys, we're at about 35 minutes or so. I want to surprise you with a little rapid fire concept here. And you guys are all connected with me on LinkedIn, so you know last summer I made posts about these myths. But I'll read a myth and just some quick thoughts, right? And if you like it, because some of these there are some a little bit of value to. It's just you can't overtake it, right? Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it is encouraging you not to be authentic, not to be truthful. It's literally telling you to be fake. And I don't know how you build a relationship if that's your go-to.
I tell people when you're presenting, like my secret to presenting, like the first thing that I could do to make myself feel better was just to say, I'm nervous. Like as soon as you say I'm nervous in front of a crowd full of people, they're like, oh, I would be too if I was dumb enough to sit in front of everybody in this room. So then you like automatically build common ground. It feels a little better. So like instead of like pretending that you're fine when you're about to fall off your chair, just say, I'm super nervous right now. And it gets better.
All right, Grant, I'll throw this one at you. The customer is always right.
Obviously, we want to listen to our customers. We want to hear what they have to say. But like, there's obviously times when, if you need to set the record straight or even just challenge, right? Challenge people, challenge their position. I think we got to do that.
Well, and as salespeople, a lot of times we're educating the buyer. Like it's not even necessarily, confrontational, we're
setting them straight was probably a little aggressive.
Well, sometimes we might have to do that too. Always be closing. That one came from a movie, I believe.
Glenn Gary Ross. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's your definition of what is closing. And if closing is relationship, if it's, what I mean? It's just, that's what's so hard about these things. It's your interpretation. And I think the interpretation before is more right. It's like, how do we interpret this? So again, is it the more the culture of like, hey, I'm going to make you sign today? Then no. But if you're always be closing because you're curious, you're trying to build a relationship, you're trying to find a problem and solve that problem, yeah, then always be closing, right? So just where does that lie and what's your belief on that? So again, it'd be another question you'd ask, is what I would say.
Abby, I feel like I cut you off before. Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say no. I mean, I work in an industry where they literally cannot close unless they they just can't until they can. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So the idea of like always be closing, you should close 8 deals a month, like you need to meet your quota is just not true. I mean, we work with volunteer fire departments where in the fall, like right now, our sales are so slow. You want to know why? Because they're finishing up harvest. Like they're all out. The farmers are farming. Like it's holidays. No one's buying a fire truck. So the idea that you have to always be closing to be a good salesman is just not true.
Yeah. All right. We actually talked about this one. This is my last one. Neil, you brought this up before we actually hit the record button on our episode here. Experience sells.
You should answer because your answer was great. You gave me the answer. Experience sells. I was talking about how my sales rep, one of my younger guys, was saying, hey, no one's taking me seriously because I'm too young. And in this industry, you got to be 40 and you got to be middle-aged and losing your hair. And he was describing me, and I was a little bit offended. And I gave him the wrong answer, and Eric had a much better one.
Well, what I said was that there's a difference between experience and expertise. Experience, I think most of us sort of measure in years, right? And therefore, when the salesperson walks in with gray hair in their beard, there's a natural assumption of experience because I'm older. But experience does not necessarily equate to being an expert at something, right? You can be 23 years old and be an expert at something, and I can be 50 and be an idiot on the same topic. And so, if you are young, if you are in your early 20s and you think that when you walk in, you're not being taken seriously, you have to draw a distinction between experience and expertise. You shouldn't walk in, worried about the fact that you're not experienced. You can make up for lack of experience or, age in a lot of different ways because you're probably hungrier. You're probably got more motivation. You probably got more drive. There's like you might work harder for the customer and I think you can sell that. But, expertise is a separate thing. And I think if you can draw that distinction, It's one way around it. All right, that was my rapid fire section.
Well, it was great talking with you guys for the third episode. Any last tidbits? Any last pieces of advice?
I was just gonna say, you're talking about experience sells. Isn't there kind of a magical power about being new too? Because you can be openly curious. Nobody expects you to know everything. So there's that whole. It's great when you get to. There's a point in your career where people expect you to have it together and to be able to really answer some questions. But being new is like a superpower. Coming
Well,
in
it
and
is.
saying, "Hey, I'm brand new to this. I would love to understand the industry and understand your needs. And while I'm new, I have a great team behind me. So you don't have to sell yourself, that you're authentic and honest. Sell that, and then sell the company that you're representing and why you went to work for them and what the services or products they have that are appealing. It's
That's
really a
that's
thing.
a great point, because the person who's walking in, who's been in 1,000 sales meetings, is walking in making a whole bunch of assumptions that might be wrong. That newer person is walking in with far fewer assumptions and a lot more curiosity. I actually love that thought, Anna. That's really good. All right, this was a ton of fun. We haven't picked our topic for our next episode a month from now, but I look forward to the conversation, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Eric.